I'm a Canadian. I live here in Mississauga. I'm not a rocket scientist, and I'm not a representative of a large company. What I am is a person who found that it was possible, as far as I can tell, and as far as some others can tell, to build a rocket at a very low price. If you work on a fairly minimal-sized rocket, and you work on a non-government sponsored type basis. If you leave out the government bureaucracy, you tend to leave out anywhere up to about 90% of the cost. The government bureaucracy is actually very important, so let's not belittle it too much. If you have national prestige and billions of dollars worth of equipment resting on a shuttle space shuttle, then you have to be sure that it goes well. So the government bureaucracy is part of trying to ensure 100% success rate. And I would sincerely like to have a 100% success rate. But when I buy a car, no one guarantees me it will be perfect. In fact, we're guaranteed that it won't be perfect, and they have a 2 or 3 year warranty to cover the defects. If I fly an airplane is much more perfect than a car, but they still anticipate to do a lot of repairs and maintenance between flights. And the same is true if you look at a commercial reusable rocket as compared to a government concept. We're aiming at reusability, we're aiming at being able to, you want me to say?
Well, I'm telling you so. I'm recording the session.
Sure. Anyhow, if you're anticipating having the rocket return to Earth on a regular basis, you're also able to do maintenance, similar to maintenance on a car. If it's not perfect in the first flight, then you can get it back, fix it, and make it perfect on the second flight, or at least closer to perfect. If this imperfection means that you can't get it at work, then you have a problem. But if you look at the recent failures on any rocket system, they've invariably been in the second or third or fourth stages, or in the attachments between the boosters and the main stage. It's almost never been coming back from orbit. It's almost always on the way up. And if you're using a single-stage orbit type concept, then you're able to recover from a failure in the launch process by dumping fuel and returning to where you took off, or returning somewhere else in the world. So part of our orientation towards building a commercial system is to have a lot less bureaucracy, but have a lot more ability to rebuild and redesign and fix it between flights. At this point, I really like to show some slides. Here comes the projector. So I'm actually going to pause for a minute, 2 or 3 minutes to audience who've never heard any talks in single-stage orbit. Any of you who were here for Paul's talk on Lockheed's system, he's already covered a lot of the reasons why single-stage makes sense. So some of these slides will tell you nothing new. But one of the main reasons that I'm into this business is I would like to get to outer space. I've applied as one of the many thousands to the Canadian astronaut program, and I've been rejected as most of the many thousands have been. Primarily because you can't get a lot of people into such approaching. Right? There's too few positions available in space on the North American government type programs or any other program. But in truth, I don't want to be an astronaut. I don't want to spend 10 years getting ready for my 2 weeks in space, or 5 years, or even 2 years. What I really want to do is buy a ticket, hop on a spacecraft, fly into space, enjoy a few hours or a week, and come home again and go on with the rest of my life. If you look at the tremendous interest in North America, Star Trek Next Generation's last episode was last week. The Dome Stadium in Toronto had 40,000 people go to see it on a large screen. Millions upon millions of people watched the last episode of Star Trek Next Generation. It's because we're interested in going to space. We want to get there. But it costs too much. At present, to put a person onto the Mir space station or the proposed American space station, you're looking at $10 to $20 million per person, and that's a subsidized price. Typical costs, these are ballpark estimates. I'm sure everyone who knows the details exactly will say that I'm wrong, but that's okay. They're still about the right range. Typically $5,000 to $7,000 a pound. Some problems with the present space systems. Most rockets are solid fuel expendable. On the way to orbit, they burn themselves to bits, they fall back into the ocean, they burn up in an atmospheric re-entry, or they're left in space. You don't get any of it back. The Ariane rocket is one of the most tried and true designs, but the most recent one failed because it was still a brand new system that had never been flown before. It was on a design that's been used many times, but it itself was brand new. The ground support is complex. When you fly a space shuttle, you have about 1,000 people, give or take 1,000, maybe it's 500 or 2,000, I'm not sure exactly. But it's a huge number of people watching the space shuttle take off, watching it orbit, watching it land. If you fly a 747 from Toronto to Miami and you had 1,000 people on the ground making sure they had a safe flight, you wouldn't be able to do it for the $400 to $500 you pay. You'd be looking at $4 million because people are expensive. As to complexity, there's a lot of equipment and machinery involved in a space shuttle launch. Government bureaucracy. As I mentioned briefly, it's important that a space shuttle has a 100% success rate. The fact that it doesn't have a 100% success rate is because there's no human endeavor that does. But they try very hard. And everything is checked over and over and over again to make sure that it's safe. And it has to be. But again, if you did that in an airplane, you would never get off the ground. Development times, the space shuttle was designed in the mid-70s. 30-year-old and 20-year-old technology is common in the space industry. Again, can you imagine buying a personal computer to put on your desk that was designed 20 years ago? It would fill this room, it would cost you more than $1 million, and it would have something like 100K memory instead of 100 megabytes memory. Because of the high cost, it's justified to make every single payload and every single satellite totally unique. If you're going to spend $1 billion, why on earth should you try to fit your system into a standard box? But if you're flying every day or every week, then you can set standards. The PC revolution came not because the IBM PC was the best, it wasn't, but because it was a standard that everyone could use. And everyone built extras for it, and the IBM PC became better because of all the extras that the other people built, not because IBM did a great job. What we need is not access to space, but affordable access to space, a slogan which I note that Paul had on his signs, what do we call them, overhead projections from the lobby presentation. It's a key word, affordable. Some solutions. If you reuse the whole thing, most of your costs are in the development of the rocket. You bring it all back to Earth, you save all that redevelopment costs. In reality, when you fly an airplane from Toronto to Miami, you have a pilot, a co-pilot, a navigator, and some stewards and stewardesses. Basically, 3 people fly. You also have a ground support, an air traffic controller who says go, and the pilot pushes the button and off you go. Beyond that, I don't know if it's necessary anymore. I doubt it. Government involvement, again, think of airlines. You don't have to have 1,000 people approve an airplane taking off. The pilot files a flight plan, and they say, yes, go. But you do need some permits, you do need some government involvement. It's not totally hard. Timing, we tend to get caught up in study programs, feasibility programs, prototypes, sub-prototypes, tertiary prototypes, and so on and so forth. You're still looking at 10 to 20 years for a fast turnaround in most systems. McDonnell Douglas recently showed you can do it in 18 months, from design to actually flying. There's no reason why you can't do a complete design, build it, and fly it, get it to us in 4 years. We're estimating 4 years. Our proposed system, I call the Firefly. If you liken the space shuttle to the Cadillac, I'm looking at a Beetle, a Volkswagen Beetle. And the closest Beetle I can think of to something that sounds like a rocket is a Firefly. A little bug that flips back and forth and takes off. Air launch, single stage orbit, remotely controlled, composite materials. But the only new thing in technology that's available in the last 5 years we're using is composite materials and small computers. The rest of it's old technology. If you take it up on an airplane, either piggyback or under the wing, and I'll show you examples of those in a few seconds. I'm fine. Yeah, we're good.
and checking you.
Thank you very much. Okay. Can everyone see and hear? Okay. All right. If you launch it from an airplane at 40,000 feet, you have pretty close to the equivalent of the solid fuel boosters on the space shuttle. And it's basically the first stage. But if you're launching off an airplane, the airplane is proven technology. You don't need to design your own airplane. The rockets, if you launch a rocket from sea level, they're not designed for that. The Rocketdyne Aerospike, which you're talking about, is actually working fine at sea level as well as higher altitudes. Most rocket engines are optimized at a particular altitude. If you start at 40,000 feet, you're already in the optimized territory and you don't lose a lot of optimization. If you take off from 40,000 feet, it's quiet. And if anyone lives around multiple airport here, and you know the noise level of airplanes and the amount of public pressure to cancel the airport, move it or something because of the noise level, quiet is very important. Return to base is possible. You can't do that on a space shuttle. You can't do that on an expendable solid fuel rocket, but you can on a single stage orbit or multiple reusable stage orbit. Flexible, we can take off on any standard commercial runway. Toronto airport runways are long enough to take off in our system because we're using standard airplane technology for the first stage. We would like to do manned flight immediately. If anyone gave me the opportunity to jump in the payload bay with a spacesuit on, I'd do it. But to do that costs a lot more. To get federal aviation approvals and other government approvals to put people on it is much more expensive. So we're going to start with remote control. It's possible with present modern computers. Remote control systems are available off the shelf. We're not into a major design and concept. Global position satellite systems. You can now tell where you are using military specs anywhere in the world within about 1 or 2 feet. If you use commercial, civilian levels, you're looking at about 50 feet or 100 feet. With GPS navigation is quite enough to get you into orbit, drop off your satellite at the right point in time, get you back to well within visual range of the runway, and then land it visually. Minimal ground support of the system, we're looking at an airline type facility. Change in attitude. The Martian explorer, which recently missed Mars last year in the summer, one of the suspected things that failed was a timing circuit, and they suspected a particular transistor. They estimated the transistor was $5. They estimated the transistor space rated, which was the same transistor, but it had a lot of testing and documentation, was $500. The basic space rating cost is 10 to 100 times higher for the same device that you have as a non-space rated device. If you're using single-staged orbit and something fails catastrophically when you're in orbit, you have a problem. But if you use single-staged orbit and it's not catastrophic but a minor failure, you've got a backup system, you can fix it. So instead of space rating, you use non-space rated high-quality stuff that is designed to work in space. You skip the documentation, you skip some of the testing, and your cost drops down by a factor of 10, and in some cases 100 times. Our design is based on single-stage orbit concepts which are more than 20 years old. Many other companies have proposed systems. Donald Douglas is working on one. Lockheed are designing systems. There's lots of single-stage orbit or assisted single-stage orbit systems. Our particular design is based on something by Gary Hudson and Dan DeLong, who at Teledyne Ground worked out a system back in the late 80s. If you look at the space shuttle, it's ferried from point to point on a 747. Lockheed in 86, 87 had proposed a space plane ferried on a 747 up to about 35 to 40,000 foot level, drop it off the space plane, or you don't drop it, but you basically do separate from the space plane in 747, and then go off to orbit from there. They did fairly extensive design techniques. They evaluated extensively. They had NASA look over the system and found that it was technically feasible at that point using the technology they had at that time. The basic design of it is trivial. You have a hydrogen tank in the front, payload in the middle, oxygen tank in the back, and standard rocket engines in the tail. Your control guidance is in the nose cone, and your in-orbit maneuvering rockets and little extras are in the wings. They reached a certain level of design. They tried to get funding. They did not get funding. They abandoned the design. If you look at the Japanese Space Agency's design of a small space vehicle, it's almost the same shape and size. There's not a lot of differences that you can toss into something like this. In 1973, one of the proposals for carrying the space shuttle was a twin B-5 airplane. Basically joining two airplanes together in the center of the wings and suspending the shuttle in the middle. This kind of configuration allows for very easy loading of the space plane or the space shuttle. You don't need the overhead crane. And it allows for very easy separation between the airplane and the space plane with the space plane engines actually in operation. Instead of burning the tail off, you are just augmenting the thrust of the airplane. You don't want to repair the 747 after every flight. This is our preferred kind of configuration. Bergner has proposed building such a system at a reasonable cost from scratch, using 747 engines and avionics and wheels and things like that. The other way to do it is to go the 747 route, which is a standard technology, no improvement. So we're not trying to introduce revolutionary new technology of any sort. Throughout our design concept, we're working on things which have been available for 20 to 30 years, except for the composite materials and the microcomputers. This is our design. It is not tiny. The little teeny white spot at the front on the right is the size of a person beside it. Basic layout is almost identical to what Teledyne Ground had, except we've used a center tail fin instead of two winglet tail fins. It's about half the size of the Teledyne Ground system. As I say, it's not tiny. 110 feet long, 65-foot wingspan, 17-foot diameter fuselage. What it is very light. The vast majority of the system is fuel. Materials, almost entirely composites or aluminum lithium on fuel tanks. But all of the materials are standard technology today. Even the space shuttle has composite wings in some of the newest space shuttles. We're looking at about a 5,000-pound payload or 2,200 kilograms. The logistics on that is that it fits very nicely on the commercial communication satellites which are being proposed at the present moment. At that kind of payload, we're quite commercially viable. Larger payload costs a lot more. The 40,000-pound payload that Lockheed are aiming at is looking at $1 billion for the demo project. If you divide that by 10, you're looking at 4,000 payload and a $100 million demo project. If you make your demo project a little better than a demo, you've got an orbital system for about the same kind of cost structure per pound as what Lockheed are proposing. So our pricing of $100 million development cost is not outrageously low. It's just a different concept and approach. Most of the weight is fuel. We're looking at 87% of the vehicle is fuel. If you can't maintain that kind of ratio, you won't make it to orbit, which is where the expendables have the advantage. They throw away a large part of the vehicle before you get to orbit. Rocket engines, we haven't entirely fixed on which rocket engines. We're looking heavily at the Pratt & Whitney RL-10. It has a 30 to 35-year history, almost always successful, and is a very well proven, very reliable system. If we have just RL-10s, we could be looking at 6 or 7 of them, or we'd have 4 RL-10s and something larger. Possibly a space shuttle main engine, possibly one of the other Russian engines or American engines. But again, our intent is to use standard available engines. From NASA Langley's calculations on the Teledyne Ground version, launch time 450 seconds, maximum acceleration 3G, and that'll take it to a 400-mile or 650-kilometer polar orbit, which fits the communication satellites perfectly. Because it's so large, when it comes back into the atmosphere, it slows down more quickly and it doesn't heat as much. The maximum temperatures are on the wing edges and the nose, and they're much lower than the carbon-carbon material will handle. We don't need the surrounding tiles that the space shuttle has. A large part of the vehicle, the entire upper surface at 85 degrees centigrade coming back in, will not require any insulation at all. It's more than a hot day at that temperature. You wouldn't enjoy it if you were sitting there, but it's well within the limits of all materials that we're using. Re-entry time between the time it hits the atmosphere and the time it lands on the Earth, about an hour and about 1,100 kilometer distance, or 700 miles. Again, much the same as what Bobby was looking at. So our numbers are not strange. They're the same kind of thing that everyone else is going to run into. And then some sketches as to what it would look like. If we went for the more expensive but preferred method of carrying it on a, say, twin B5 or twin L1011 or something like that, then we'd suspend it in the middle wings, take it up to about 40,000 feet, fire it off the orbit, drop the payload, and bring it back to the runway. Whether it came back to the same runway or not is certainly desirable to come back to the same runway for logistics, but it could land on almost any commercial airport runway, except that nobody would want it landing there because it's a dead stick landing. You don't have any room for LRX. So trying to bring in a Toronto airport, if you miss by half a mile, you're going to the main city, causes problems. Turnaround time, we calculated to be about 30 people per shift. It's a fairly small system. Half of the people are working on the airplane. Half of the people are working on checking out the space plane. Primarily, you're looking at the engines as a check over, as well as the body. The engines are the main time. If you go to 3 shifts or 90 people, I hate to do it with 90 people, but I'll be falling all over each other. We could turn it around, we estimate, in 2 days. And as McDonnell Douglas have done on their DCX, it's possible we could do it a lot faster if you're in a rush and you count on the engines and everything still being quite safe. I prefer not to do it faster than that. Expected lifetime, as far as we can tell, the components should all last for about 250 to 500 flights. And then the costing, why we're going to try to do this and why it makes sense. The prime cost is fuel, maintenance, overhauls, and spares. The maintenance is primarily the people's time. The spares and the overhauls are time and parts. We're estimating $500,000 per flight to orbit with a 5,000 pound payload. If we add into that our estimated $100 million development cost, and we spread that over 200 flights, it's another $500,000 per flight. Total on that, $200 a pound and a 5,000 pound payload. If you compare that to the present market cost of bringing a 5,000 pound payload to orbit, our profit, if we charge the present market going rate, is somewhere in the order of $20 million a flight. If we did 5 flights, we'd break even. If we did 10 flights, we'd be making a very substantial profit. The reality is that if I can do it at $200 a pound, people will ask me for $2 or $3 million flights, and it'll take us 100 flights to break even. And that's okay. I can handle that. Potential market, primarily communication satellites in low Earth orbit, polar orbits. In particular, Teledesic proposed 924 satellites to be launched by the year 2001. Their plan is ambitious, and there are many who feel that they're nuts, and that's okay, they fit just fine with us. They are estimating $1.6 billion in their satellites, or a little more than $1.5 million per satellite. Their satellites are 758 kilograms at the moment and subject to change and adjustment up or down. The present going cost if they were to launch it on American rocket systems would be about $10 to $15 million each. They're looking at a tenth of that pricing. They need us if they're going to succeed, or something like McDonnell Douglas' system, and we need them if we're going to succeed. Other than that, I need some investor who has $100 million, and that would help greatly. Or even $1 or $2 million to get the project out of the design concept stage into the design reality stage. And with that, I'm done. One other comment. You'll note the Canadian maple leaf on the tail of it at the moment. I'm a Canadian. I'm based in Canada. I'd like the project to be Canadian. We'd probably use Churchill as our launch base, as it is already a designated rocket range, and it has fairly good weather year-round. I'm open to donations of money from other countries, in which case I might change the symbol from maple leaf to stars and stripes. But I really enjoyed the Canadian project. It's the kind of thing which is imaginative enough that Canada probably would do well in. And I'm done at this point. So any questions? Yes?
Actually, that would only be 75 million US dollars.
No, actually, it's 100 million US dollars.
Oh, is it?
Not 125 million.
Didn't US dollars.
Yes, sir.
What is your estimated cost of essentially two aircraft and then merging them together?
It depends on the estimates on how we do it. If we literally buy two L-1011s, modify the center wing, then probably $15 to $20 million. If we buy two L-1011s, used ones are going for about $6 million each, and disassemble them, build our own airframe, our own wings, which is one of the things Bergner suggested. Then his estimate ranges from about $15 million to carry a 100,000-pound space plane, and up to about $60 million for a 300,000-pound space plane, and we're somewhere in between. So there's various ways of doing that. The other option is simply to lease a commercial 747, in which there's many idle ones which are still workable, and just put a low carrying capacity in the back and carry like a space shuttle. Yes, sir.
One of the biggest problem you have with this type of project is releasing. When you get up to a high altitude, you want to release this single stage orbit, releasing from the support aircraft. I think Boeing came out with the concept to have sort of an aspect vehicle on the underbelly of a bigger mother aircraft. And then once they got to a high altitude speed, they would release and fire the rockets into the orbit.
But you're thinking of gravity, right? When you're releasing the space plane from the 747, you're looking at it as something in the 747. But if you're in the space plane, what you're doing is dropping the 747, right? Because of the aerodynamics, they pull themselves apart as soon as you let them. And the space shuttle has been released very successfully from the 747. So it's a proven technology. It's not a new and different thing. Yes, sir.
I noticed that you're using aluminum roofing tanks. I noted in an earlier conference in this room that the locking you were using graphite composites. Which would they be any lighter, or is it just?
Graphite composites would be lighter, but the problem with that is that they haven't done it yet. Aluminum lithium is a standard material.
Okay.
And one of the essences of our design is to use standard technologies. There's almost nothing new in our design.
Firefly 1 would have to be Firefly 2 with graphite composites.
Sure. Once we got it up and running, we'll do that.
I think I'd have more confidence in the Firefly having a successful maiden flight than I would have confidence in a Siamese cargo plane on its maiden flight.
Oh,
And
absolutely.
you're just talking about standard techniques. Have you? Would you like to talk about that for a moment?
Sure. If you're flying people on an airplane, then the federal aviation community will go through tremendously extensive testing before you put a person on it. And if you're flying people on the space shuttle, you're hopefully going through a lot of testing before you do that. But the reality is in space, no one does. The space shuttle was dropped off the 747 4 times before the first manned mission. Right? There is nothing reliable taking people to space. The Energia, the Proton rockets, the Saturn V5s, and so on. All of them were new rockets used the first time on old designs. But an old design is something that's been used 5 or 10 times before. So space, unfortunately, doesn't have that luxury at the moment. If we've used it 100 times to launch satellites and then put a person in, which will be closer to our design goal, then we'll have used it more often than any other rocket system. And though nowhere near as safe as an airplane, much safer than the 1:60 ratio that Buzz Aldrin was mentioning this morning on space flights.
Excuse me, I think you may have misinterpreted my question. It looks like a pretty good vehicle, but the two-hulled the cargo plane, that's what I meant by the Siamese airplane. That looks more radical than that thing does.
Well, it's actually been done as early as the Mustang airplane in World War II. They found it ran much faster with 2 bodies. Basically, they were in a hurry to build a 2-engine vehicle. So rather than trying to design something that carried 2 engines, they cut the wing off, tied 2 Mustangs together, and they had a 2-engine vehicle. It has been done before,
But the Mustang would, I'm sure,
much smaller.
would fit in this room with lots of room to
Oh,
spare.
yes.
But if you're talking about something like a two 747s, are there any runways wide enough to take them?
Yes, there are. The
Yeah,
runway
sure.
space is not greatly
No
different.
problem.
The V5 estimate was 300 feet for turning radius as a twin system. And that's well within the comfortable range of a standard runway airport. So yes, you could actually fly on standard airports. Yes, sir.
Is it conceivable to utilize the present NASA modified 747 launches?
No,
It's not. It's not.
because of the government bureaucracy, the airplane itself would carry with no problem. But the bureaucracy would probably cost me $10 to $20 million per flight to get it on. Right? And that's important again. NASA cannot take risks. National prestige is very important, and the safety of their space shuttle, which is billions of dollars, is very important. There's no way they're going to risk our lightweight little toy with their billions of dollars worth of space shuttles. Yes?
Yeah, you're going to take this on this new wing to 40,000 feet, right?
About that.
Okay, what speed are they going to drop it at?
Hopefully 500 miles an hour. Yes?
I'm concerned about your development time because the DCX, as you mentioned, Douglas, development time of 4 years, but that's only part of the main project developer that would take 10 years to develop. So in actuality, you're only seeing a turnaround, a 4-year turnaround is only part of the total turnaround to develop a whole single stage orbit.
Well, the DCX by itself is more complex than what we're designing. It's trying to stand up in 4 rockets. The computer control and navigation to do that is much more complex than an airplane being blasted by a rocket engine. The airframe is not drastically different in complexity. The DCX could go to orbit if it were of a lighter design and build, which it's not. It's there for one orbit. But they're aiming at a much larger vehicle again. They're looking at a 40,000 pound capacity to orbit. I think that's correct, or 20,000? 20,000. It's still larger. And part of the complexity on that is that it's bigger, it's a more complex design, and 10 years versus 4 years is still not a drastic difference. I think the better comparison is 18 months to go to DCX and fly it, compared to 4 years to build a Firefly and fly it.
I think DCY isn't so much more complex as it does require the development of a new engine that hasn't been built yet. And that's really the whole thing.
Well, we're trying very hard to not develop new engines. Again, something like the Rocketdyne linear aerospike is really neat, but it's still newer than what we've been aiming at.
But part of the key problem is that in the focus on the NASA models, which basically your vehicle really will not meet the NASA models.
No,
Who cares?
And that's the thing.
it's a different viewpoint of
It's
space.
a different viewpoint.
Yes.
When you say that all components will last 250 flights, does that include the engines? Are you saying you can get the engines to last 250 flights, or does that involve replacing them?
It involves basically on the standard proposal, we say 6 RL-10 engines. We take 1 out each flight and replace it, and we check it over extensively. We do a total rebuild every 50 hours of flight time. The RL-10 is one of the world's most trusted, reliable liquid-fueled engines, and it has run for that kind of levels quite safely. Yes.
You said that fellow DSIC means you need to have spoken to Bill Gates, got him on screen.
No, but I have spoken to these, and they have spoken to
After all,
me.
he does have some money.
Yeah, he does.
He just lost $100 million in a lawsuit, that's nothing.
Well, that is nothing for him. Teledesic are building satellites, not rockets, and they believe that there's quite enough rocket power in the world at the moment to get their satellites up, including the shuttle, the Ariane, the Russian rockets, the Chinese rockets, and the McDonnell Douglas DCX is one of the ones we're thinking of. There are many rockets in the design stage. We're in the design prototype stage. They're talking to us. We're talking to them, but they've not given us the deposit yet on the launches. Yes?
Curious about your re-entry temperature.
Mhm.
You mentioned that this is quite large and slow down rapidly, but this is a good deal smaller than the shuttle.
No, it's not.
It is not.
No, it's not a completely one on the shuttle. It's almost as big as a shuttle. And that's one of the strangenesses as we kept working on the numbers, is that it's got to be a very large vehicle. 110 feet long is big.
Yeah.
17 feet diameter is about as big as all those chairs across. Right? You're looking at the equivalent to a large airplane in many cases.
Still, the temperature is significantly lower.
Well, we don't have the weight of the shuttle.
So weighs 200,000 pounds.
Ours weighs 28,000 pounds without the fuel
Okay.
versus 280,000. We're a tenth the weight in much the same surface area.
Okay. Easier to accelerate.
Very much so.
The other thing I was curious about was costs to operate your Twin P5.
Aha.
That wouldn't be cheap.
No.
Have you figured that into the cost per launch or your maintenance costs?
Primarily it's fuel,
Yeah.
plus, again, overhauls. And half of the maintenance time was checking out the B5. And that is figured in as part of the cost. 15 to 30 people are checking the B5 or the Alton 11 or whatever. Yes.
I think so it's a plan to do a similar project with Russians, rather. We're going to take an Ant-Med 225 and launch a small space plane, which they call MACUS, at the equator. I was wondering if you could look into that project.
No, I haven't. But I think it's a good idea.
Because there's a lot of people who were looking at the same thing. Recently, we were at the Midwest Space Development Conference, and there's this one fellow who had a project which he called the Third Millennium, and he was proposing having 6 RL-10 engines on the back and a huge hydrogen tank. They look almost identical.
It has to look almost identical. There's not much else you can do in it. Either you give it wings or you don't. But basically, it has to be a long cylinder with a hydrogen tank, oxygen tank, and a small payload tank.
But a big issue for this gentleman was the separation. Maybe if you're
I think he may be overworried, because it has been done before. Separation technology from one airplane to another is not unusual. So it's a concern, but not terrible. Yes?
In a sense, same question with 2 parts. Your hydrogen losses, and what about ullage, the residual propellant?
In what sense in residual? Hydrogen losses, basically, we'd be able to pump hydrogen in from the 747 or the Twin B5 just prior to launch. So we'd top the tanks off just before launch.
What are you estimating for the amount of propellant that's residual when you enter into orbit?
Very little, just enough to get out of orbit. Probably in the
The problem you run into is
how long
that your
does it last?
vehicle is going to have unusable propellant on board. What's your estimate for that?
I haven't estimated that. That I leave to the engineers.
Okay.
I'm not an engineer.
That's typically 3/4 of 1%, which is almost half of your payload.
Yes, that is half. Our payload is about 2%. And if we had unusable fuel in the tanks of 3/4 of a percent or something like that, that's very substantial. But the engineers
That's
are
the
sure.
typical number that is used.
Well, part of it is that we plan to use that to get out of orbit. Right? We use a small secondary little thruster to slow the vehicle down, which pushes the fuel back towards the turbopumps, and then turbopump it back into the R10s and fire it to get out of orbit. But again, that is something which the engineers have looked at and are reasonably confident we're okay. And I can't say better than that. Yes, sir.
John, just to respond to that a little bit, our Lockheed concept, we've talked about returning to Earth with hydrogen on board, and there's going to be a lot of issues associated with that for certifying vehicles, especially if you want to fly over populated areas. So you may indeed need a very thorough purge system, which of course you want to keep your tanks pressurized to keep that structural integrity, but you may not be coming
Which
back
means
with
you're
much
adding
hydrogen.
nitrogen on board as well.
That's right, that's an extra system. that you have
Why
to
is
carry.
hydrogen considered any more dangerous than jet fuel?
Because it's a gas and blows up very
Yeah,
easily.
but if you,
I think it's
not
up to
if you look at hydrogen explosions compared to jet fuel explosions, they're actually safer because it burns upwards and it doesn't.
Yeah, it's a
burns rather
lighter
than
gas.
explode.
That's the only thing that's good about it.
But you have a large pressurized vessel, and I think the explosive potential.
Your biggest worry is that you lose pressurization, in which case your vehicle goes.
And I wanted to just support a couple other things too that we found with our concept. First of all, for the LOX tanks, we are assuming we're probably also going to have to go with aluminum lithium because there's a difficulty containing oxygen in a graphite-based system. And your development cost, or development schedule too, is right about in line with what we found.
Thank you very much.
So,
In that case, would Lockheed support our project? It's a lot cheaper than $5 billion that you're looking at yours.
I think that's a very good point, sir.
Okay. Yes, sir.
Well, I'm interested in studying myself of the idea of using air launch for satellites and spacecraft. So it's surprised you're going to the double-sided C5B there. Could you just simply modify a single C5, say the overhead attachment? Since your C5 will presume it heavier load carrying capacity than the 747.
The 747 can actually carry about 400,000 pound load. And we're looking at a 250,000 pound load to get back harder still. Apologies on these flashing slides there. There. The problem with the C5 having just a single C5 is that the wings are too low. You wouldn't be able to fit the space plane underneath it. The double C5, the wings are lifted up quite substantially to fit it underneath. So a single wing, you have an off-balance airplane. If you had an above-wing airplane, you might be able to fit it under, but then you're terribly off balance. And when you drop the space plane, then your airplane kind of flips over on its side. And the pilot is high enough up you can be covered, but it's a very uncomfortable departure. And it's a very uncomfortable takeoff, because you're taking off with the full maximum load out on the wing. A 250,000 pound load is quite substantial. So the airplane will tend to take off like that. And then you try to raise it up afterwards. Your center of gravity problems are quite substantial.
Because I was thinking recently about the idea of, like the airlines, because I'm remembering back to the old X-15 projects, where you point out now you're going to offset weight. I'm also wondering if you have somebody from Lockheed there. Has anybody at Lockheed ever thought about redesigning the C5B to specialize in air launch and something like that, where you would modify the thing you have to use for under fuselage launch, so you have to actually rebuild a good portion of fuselage there.
Either way, if you're trying to redesign an airplane, you need a purpose to do that. And Lockheed's present design doesn't need that. And in fact, most of the designs don't need that. So we're into the wonderful position of having to design your own airplane if we're going to do that, or working with some designs which others have done. And again, we prefer to use known technology, which means that our costing is fitting above right. As soon as we try revolutionary new things, or even not revolutionary, but somewhat new things, our costs rise drastically.
There is a precedent in OSC that just modified an L-1011 to carry the Pegasus.
Yes, but it's tiny.
Much smaller, yes.
Yes.
Yes, but the Russians are running a program called MAX that's being, that they're proposing launching off their Antonov, which carries over 500,000 pounds.
Yeah, which would be an ideal airplane and probably cheaper than some of the others.
Yeah.
The twin B5.
It has a split tail, too.
The split tail is nice, and I can fire up the engines. The twin airplane is a luxury. It's easy to load. I don't need a crane. I can literally load it at any airport where the space plane lands. An overhead piggyback type system, you have to have a crane big enough to carefully place it. And if your crane operator has jitters that day, or a bit of an overhang from the night before, and he swings it a little bit too hard, you wipe out both the space plane and the airplane. On the underwing loading, you trundle the space plane underneath it, you drop hooks down, jimmy it up with a jack or hydraulic lift, and you're done. It's very simple. Yes?
Two items once more. Has any experience with Pegasus had any bearing on this, or have you been able to apply anything from Pegasus on this at all?
Well, Pegasus is done by a private enterprise group. Not quite on budget, but reasonably close to it. And they're using a composite airframe as compared to aluminum or other materials. So that has bearing. But they're using solid fuel, multi-stage, total expendable, and their payload is tiny, and their vehicle is tiny, and that doesn't really total change it. So, no. I think so. On the other hand, hopefully someone here has $1 million to invest in a really good project.
Probably a couple
A couple $100,000 would be fine to get it started. Realistically, we've literally searched around the world for backers. We've talked to venture capitalists, stock market brokers, we've talked to government agencies, and found surprisingly little interest except for a few spots. The Canadian Federal Business Development Bank has expressed some interest in supporting it, and the Irish government has expressed some interest in supporting it. And Ireland has a lot of advantages over Churchill. It's a lot warmer. But Churchill is closer to home. And I've been there, and it's not too bad. So it's nice to see. There's a company called Active Aerospace who are trying to make Churchill as a major commercial rocket launch site. And they have talked to us, we've talked to them, and they'd love to support us, but they haven't got any money either. So again, there's a lot of interest. There hasn't yet been any cash coming forth. I'm very hopeful there will be some very soon, because if I don't build the system soon, I won't be there in time to launch things like the Teledesic satellites. Teledesic and others like themselves would support us at some stage if we get far enough along the line, and if they don't have other options already in process, such as saving with all other stuff.
Key thing of Teledesic is that once they get their system up and operating at current launch costs, then they would very seriously, when they're pulling in this revenue, then would very seriously look into trying to lower that cost of replacement.
Yes, they would. Teledesic's plan is to put up 924 satellites in 18 months, which is a very substantial effort. They plan to replace about 2 a month for the next 10 years as a minimum, and then to replace the entire 924 10 years later. So there is a tremendous market for reusable rockets or non-reusable rockets, just through Teledesic alone. I very sincerely hope they succeed.
Yeah, that's the key.
Please, as could be that Bill Gates and some other major backers are behind it, because it gives us a chance to succeed.
You end up with a chicken and egg situation.
But if we both develop together, then that's fine. There are definitely other contenders. Lockheed would be a very good contender, as would McDonnell Douglas. And there are others on the drawing board, or even a little farther ahead than that, who are also working on it. Yes?
Have you by any chance spoken to Mr. Ted Rogers? He's in the city in flight history.
I have not. Do you know Ted Rogers? No. Rogers Cable TV. He's actually working with Bill Gates on the Microsoft interconnection on cable network systems. So he is interested and knows about the Teledesic system also. Everyone's interconnected at some stage. Okay. I have 5 minutes left. Well, thank you very much.